From the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler. I am today at the Ohioana Book Festival, as you can see behind me, and I'm talking to Jen Hirt about her memoir, Under Glass, The Girl with 1,000 Christmas Trees. And it's a memoir of her childhood growing up in Strongsville, Ohio, right? And you left, came back to Strongsville, Ohio, and all of your greenhouses were gone.
That's right.
In a manner similar to Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders, it says here on the back, about finding all the changes that have occurred. So tell me about the background for your book and how it all got started.
Okay, well, the book is about Hirt's greenhouse and flowers, which was in Strongsville, Ohio since 1915 up till about 2005. There were 4 generations of my family had worked there since 1915, starting with my great-grandfather all the way up to my brother, Matt. And what the book Under Glass does is it covers basically the downfall and the loss of that business. What started to happen right around 1997, 1999 time frame, a lot of bad things started happening with my family. My mom was diagnosed with MS, my dad left her. As the family started to fall apart, the greenhouse business started to fall apart as well because it was a family business, and if the family's not there, the business isn't going to be there. So what I was seeing every time I came home from grad school to visit the greenhouses was that the greenhouses were falling apart at the same time. So I could see this parallel story happening, a metaphor obviously. As the family fell apart, the businesses fell apart. So I started to write about it and to document what happens when a family goes through that much turmoil.
Okay, and that's the memoir.
That is the memoir.
So tell me about the writing of the story. That seems like a difficult thing to do because you're writing with a lot of the people that you've grown up with, and they're reading it along with you, or do you think they're going to read it at the end? And that's got to impact a lot about descriptions and people as characters.
Well, the book was my MFA thesis at the University of Idaho. And there are 12 essays in it, and I think a number of them were published independently in magazines and journals and that sort of thing. So my family was aware that I was writing it. I would send them pieces of it. They saw the MFA thesis. They saw the ones that were published independently. So they knew what was going on. And I talked to them and interviewed them independently, about their memories of certain things at the greenhouse or what they thought was going on with the greenhouse. So they knew I was working on it the whole time. And I tried to be sensitive to things that they didn't want to be in the book. They all had the option of reading the manuscript before it went to print. None of them did. My dad, my brother, and my mom chose not to read the whole thing thoroughly before it went to print. So
have they since then, or is this still?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have read it and said good things about it.
Okay.
But it is tricky to write about your family.
Right.
Everybody has different memories of things. Everybody has different interpretations of what happened that day or that hour.
Right.
And it's a memoir, but I would not say that anything in there is the absolute truth. It's just my interpretation of what was happening to the family.
So how does this work out when you're in grad school and you're working through all this stuff? Were there moments that were really difficult to work through in terms of other people giving you feedback in groups and saying, this or that might make a better character arc, but you want to remain true to your interpretation of the truth? You see the question that's redeciding?
For the MFA in grad school, it was 3 years of creative writing workshops, like you said, where I would submit a chapter to a group of 20 students and they would critique it, tear it apart, praise it, whatever. And people did have varying suggestions for how to go about this book. I've had suggestions from let's just do a history of all the greenhouses in the world and don't worry about your family's greenhouse.
That's a big project, the greenhouses in the world.
Someone said, why don't you just write about glass? The history of glass is very interesting. So I got, lots of different suggestions right there. But ultimately I knew that I wanted to keep it focused on my greenhouse because anybody can write a history of greenhouses, but I was the only one who could write about the history of Hirt's greenhouse and more importantly the present of Hirt's greenhouse, what was happening in those 7 years before it was sold and demolished and basically gone. So and the feedback I got from my MFA peers was absolutely helpful. I mean, it was I I read lots of different styles of writing. They were all working on their own projects at the same time, so I don't think I could have written the book without being in an MFA program because I had so much guidance.
One of the things that I'm always curious about in a memoir is that a memoir is a particular genre, but you make a lot of conscious choices about style as you go through it. What are some of the choices that you played with? I mean, you think about who's the narrator, what is that, how does that work? Is it omniscient? Is it a singular? Is it limited? Is it unreliable?
Right.
Which a lot of memoirs lately have gone through. What did you go through on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. All 12 chapters in this book started off as essays independently. In each essay, I was telling like the story over from the beginning and introducing my family and all that. And it wasn't until probably about 4 or 5 years after I wrote each of the 12 essays that I started to see a way to put it together as a memoir. So I had to have more of a narrative arc, like you said. What I did was I looked at the first sentence and the last sentence of each essay and tried to put them in together in a way that made sense. So if you just pull out the first sentences and you pull out the last sentences, they form a sort of arc in the story. So, there are certain essays that had to go in the beginning because they introduce the history, they set up the background, they talk about what's happening with the family. There were a few essays that had to go at the end because they resolve certain things and they tie up a lot of the metaphors and the images and stuff like that. So the hardest thing was getting it together in the form of a memoir. For so many years I thought of it as separate essays, and then to suddenly have to put it in a chronological, somewhat memoir was very difficult and really challenging, and I think that was the hardest last step to take there.
That was one of the things I was wondering about when you said a somewhat chronological order, because the essays being written at different times, you're a different person as you're at these different times. Also, they're out of order. You pick the best thing that you're thinking about at the time, or rather the best story probably is the one that you wrote first, and then you realized that you could explore other things as you went on. Is that how that was created?
That's kind of how it works, and memory itself does not function chronologically at all. Our memories are constantly spiraling back through 10 different associations at any given time. So it wouldn't be realistic to write a chronological memoir like that, because it's not the way we think, that's not the way we remember things. So for example, in the book there might be an anecdote about me and my brother playing in the greenhouses in the winter or something like that. And then I move on to a comparison with a historical greenhouse in England, or a poem from Theodore Retke, who had his own greenhouses in Michigan. So I'm kind of moving all over the place and making more thematic connections rather than a chronological narrative of things that happen. Okay. So it's very thematic.
Are there memoirists that were particularly influential for you as you were writing those, and who were they?
Yeah, my earliest influence was Scott Russell Sanders, who writes collections of essays and memoirs. He's visited all 3 of the schools I've been to as a visiting writer, so I've gotten to meet with him at all different stages of my writing. And he just writes very even-handed, clear, thought-provoking, intelligent essays about what's happening like in his backyard and the rest of the world, So he was a great influence right there. Annie Dillard would be a clear influence once you read the book. Her take on metaphysics, her playfulness with language. I was reading Annie Dillard left and right when I wrote this book, and I think those are clear. Dave Eggers' heartbreaking work of staggering genius. I read that in 2000, and it completely changed the way I wrote. His tone, the way that he was telling a story, his iconoclastic style, breaking down the things you're supposed to respect and challenging them, that sort of thing.
Okay. And the final thing is that you spent a lot of ink writing the thing, but you also carry some of the ink around with you.
I do.
On your arm, and you've got this, I think this is the greenhouse, or a representation of the greenhouse, right?
Yeah.
And that also forms the cover of the book.
Right.
So we've got, look, it's crazy, it's all 2 in 1, looking very different in the light.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jen Hirt, for talking to us today at Ohioana. And from the Center for the Study and Teaching of Writing at The Ohio State University, this is Doug Dangler saying, keep writing.